Hello, I'm Alex, and welcome to the History Chronicles. If you like our work, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you would like to support the channel in return for exclusive perks, please visit our Patreon page. Now, on with the video. Today's History Chronicle takes us back to March 1939. The world peace is shattered, Hitler's forces having entered Austria and Czechoslovakia months earlier. The leaders and people of Britain and France watched worried as Hitler turned his attention to Poland. In September 1939, Hitler's armies invaded Poland, starting World War II. However, our story begins in the United States. Over the course of several decades, scientists in Europe and the United States had pioneered efforts in nuclear technology. As they experimented with nuclear reactions, scientists in the United States became more and more concerned that nuclear power could be used as a weapon with catastrophic results. On March 17, 1939, two nuclear scientists from Columbia University, George Pegram and Enrico Fermi, met with Admiral Stanford Hooper and several other US officials to discuss the possibilities of nuclear warfare. This meeting went well, the scientists receiving $1,500 American, the equivalent of $31,000 today, to further fund their research. This meeting would be the start of official contact between the scientific community and the US government that would eventually result in the Manhattan Project. Soon after this meeting, Leo Szilard and Eugene Wigner, both Hungarian immigrants, became increasingly concerned that Nazi Germany would seek to develop uranium ore, a highly radioactive material used in nuclear experiments, for weapons. Both men decided it was imperative that Germany lose access to the resource-rich Belgian Congo. However, unsure of how to proceed, the men turned to Albert Einstein, the German-born scientist and international celebrity, for help. As they prepared to write the Belgian king, Alexander Sachs, a friend and advisor of US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, suggested the scientists instead turn to the American government for help. Sachs became the political representative of a growing group of nuclear scientists concerned about the development of nuclear weapons and met with President Roosevelt in a private meeting on October 11, 1939. Roosevelt, after this and another possible meeting, was convinced of the importance of funding nuclear physics studies. A committee called the Advisory Committee on Uranium began investigating the possibility of nuclear weapons. American military officers were very skeptical of the project, however, tentatively supported further research. Scientists across the United States continued to research at a frantic pace. Their efforts further accelerated by the invasion of France in the spring of 1940 by the Nazi government. The movement gained a boost when the Committee on Uranium was disbanded and reorganized as the National Defense Research Committee, which was larger and better funded. As the Nazis continued to overrun European nations, scientists in America, many of whom were European immigrants, felt an urgency in creating superior technology for the war. During these early months, British scientists provided support to their American colleagues in the form of the Maud Report, a lengthy document given to American scientists on October 3rd. This report detailed that a bomb was in fact possible with nuclear fission. This report not only energized American scientists, but also led to closer collaboration between the Americans and the British on this massive project. Several days after receiving the Maud Report, Vannevar Bush, one of the lead scientists and head of the National Defense Research Committee, presented the project's findings to President Roosevelt and some other top American officials. Roosevelt instructed Bush that going forward, all information on the project would be sent to only himself, the Vice President, Henry Wallace, Secretary of War, Henry Stimson, Army Chief of Staff, General George C. Marshall, and Bush himself. This new group would be known as Top Policy Group. This group would be key in supporting and promoting the Manhattan Project to its conclusion. On December 10, 1941, the United States was thrown violently into the conflict with the attack on Pearl Harbor by Japan. As the United States rushed to complete its military preparation, President Roosevelt gave the atomic project a tremendous boost. On January 19, 1942, Roosevelt gave permission for the American atomic bomb project to begin in full. The war spurred efforts from the president to advance the project as never before. Across America, in universities such as Columbia and Princeton University, the University of Chicago, and the University of California, Berkeley, scientists began conducting experiments meant to help create the atom bomb. The process was going at full speed, in part because of fears that the Nazis were developing their own nuclear weapons program. In March of 1942, Roosevelt okayed the project to continue no matter the costs. This lack of restrictions enabled increased movement in the project, especially as the United States Army became increasingly involved. As the US military became more involved, the headaches of bureaucratic operations increased. Some scientists moved away from the project as they became frustrated with the bureaucracy of the military. However, many continued to develop the project. In July of 1942, an important development occurred when the US government bought a huge tract of land, roughly 83,000 acres, in order to build a nuclear production facility. After spending over $4 million and relocating some 400 families, they named the new area the Manhattan Engineer District. Over the Manhattan District was appointed Leslie Groves on September 17, 1942. Groves was energetic and demanding. He was known for running a tight headquarters and offended more than one person in his demand for efficiency and exactness. Groves was essential to the Manhattan Project, as it was through his persistence and stubbornness the project was able to get funds and support. Groves was determined to succeed, and heaven help the man who stood in his way. With the project fully underway, millions of dollars were poured into the program. In Tennessee, a secret city called Oak Ridge was established and boasted a population of 75,000. Yet, due to its connections to the project, it was put on no maps and kept off limits. Similar cities appeared in the West as well. People who lived in these cities helped with the projects in various ways. Without these vast cities constructed in secrecy, the Manhattan Project would not have succeeded. In 1943, the Manhattan Project was progressing at a dizzying pace, with its thousands of employees and hundreds of scientists working non-stop on the production of the first atomic bomb. Hundreds of individual projects relating to the bombs, including silver coil manufacturing, uranium mining, electromagnetic facilities production, and others, were all part of the elaborate and multifaceted Manhattan Project. In Tennessee, at the Manhattan facilities, the primary focus was on enriching or preparing uranium to be placed in the bombs. However, in the western portion of the country in Hanford, Washington, the scientific teams worked on dealing with plutonium, a highly radioactive element produced from nuclear fission. The Hanford site was around 670 square miles. Located in the desert, the site was barely inhabited. Local inhabitants pushed back on the seizure of their lands, but the government, by 1943, had secured most of it. Meanwhile, at Los Alamos, New Mexico, another facility was established for the study of nuclear energy and the atomic bomb. This site was perhaps the most secret and also the intellectual center of the project. Headed by J. Robert Oppenheimer, an American physicist, the facility worked to create nuclear weapons. While officials were not at first confident in Oppenheimer, he proved to be a successful administrator and influential promoter of the nuclear project. He was appointed director on February 25, 1943. At Los Alamos, the 8,000 or so scientists faced harder conditions than the average American. Often milk, meat, and fresh fruits and vegetables were in short supply. Many were also kept from their families and worked long, difficult hours looking to develop the bomb. Many scientists came from European nations, and especially from Great Britain, to aid the Americans. These scientists were essential to creating the bomb. However, there were some spies for Russia, such as the scientist Klaus Fuchs, who sent detailed information to the Soviet Union. Tests first began to be conducted in September 1943. Accidents occasionally occurred, one happening on the night of August 21, 1945, when Harry Dalian accidentally dropped a radioactive element that caused a small nuclear chain reaction. He died less than 30 days later from the exposure to the radiation. This new technology was very raw, and few understood the full implications of nuclear radiation on the human body. This did not deter scientists, however, as they saw their project as essential to saving democracy. On January 20, 1945, at Los Alamos testing station, the first fast neutron chain reaction occurred, or in other words, the first small nuclear explosion. Several months later, scientists became more confident in their ability to carry out a nuclear strike. Having modified planes built in factories across the US in early 1944, 17 had arrived in October 1944. Another group arrived in the spring of 1945. Among these was the Enola Gay, the other named Boxcar. These two planes would go down in history as the planes that dropped the atom bombs on Japan. During the months prior to the devastating bombing of Japan, the air unit attached to the atomic training program dropped 155 test bombs. These practice bombing runs helped the scientists at Los Alamos work out problems in the bombs, such as designs and construction. However, none of these were full-scale tests. Scientists were not eager to test their weapons on the enemies, in part to prevent the Germans or Japanese from discovering their secrets. Several months of negotiations were carried out to find a suitably isolated site in which the group could secretly detonate a full-sized bomb. The final location that was chosen was the Llorando del Muerto Desert in New Mexico. At this site, the Trinity Bomb was assembled, and the site developed for the nuclear test in the spring of 1945. Workers at times spent 18-hour days working on the project, hoping to have it ready for the war, which was beginning to wind down in 1945. After months of work, on July 13, 1945, the final assembly of the Trinity experimental bomb began. Scientists were giddy, but also extremely nervous. One scientist wagered whether the nitrogen in the atmosphere would ignite and destroy the state of New Mexico. Others bet on the strength of the atomic explosion. On July 16th, the Trinity Bomb was dropped, causing an explosion that far exceeded anyone's expectations, as the ball of fire from the blast hurled into the atmosphere. The world had entered the nuclear age, for better or for worse. The scientists of the Manhattan Project quickly communicated the news to Secretary of State Henry Stimson. The top-secret message arrived at the Potsdam Conference in Europe, where Stimson, as well as Churchill and President Harry S. Truman, were present negotiating with the Soviet Union leader, Joseph Stalin. Truman shared with Joseph Stalin that the Americans had a new weapon of destructive force. Stalin, who was well briefed on the project due to a vast network of spies in America, acted disinterested, but secretly was terrified of the success of the experiment. In New Mexico, scientists were still awed by the explosion, it having exceeded all expectations. The Trinity explosion had become the largest man-made blast in history. They also began preparing more bombs for an attack on Japan. 2 bombs, Fat Man and Little Boy, were shipped to the island of Tinian in the northern Mariana Islands. By the end of July, US officials, after having issued an ultimatum against Japan, prepared to drop the bomb. Brutal warfare in the Pacific had made, to some officials, the nuclear bomb the weapon of choice to quickly end the war. This supposition has become a matter of heated controversy among laymen, academics, politicians, and scientists since then. On August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, Nagasaki was bombed as well. Japan would surrender unofficially on August 15th, thereby ending the war. The Manhattan Project had been a success. The Manhattan Project has caused intense debate on the morality of nuclear weapons and using science in such a brutal manner. Many of the scientists who worked on the project later renounced the weapons that they had helped build. Everyone understood that the world was forever changed by the explosion of the first atomic bomb, the Trinity. The world was shattered even more with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Ever since, the world has lived in constant fear of nuclear war, as weapons of mass destruction have proliferated to several countries. The debate continues to rage if it was worth the high price of constant fear, mass casualties, and environmental destruction to create such a weapon. You've been watching the History Chronicles. We'd love to know what you think of the Manhattan Project. Please let us know below, and if you enjoyed our video, please give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Also, if you'd like to support our work going forward, please visit our Patreon page, and we look forward to seeing you again on the next episode of the History Chronicles.